Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week, along with our special guest, Colby Mead from the Colby Cast, we're going to take a deep dive look into all the projects that Lucasfilm released in a year-end review of 2022. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter and Hive at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. We look forward to connecting with you on those platforms. Also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. And finally, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everyone, welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations. On the other side of this quick mini segment here, we will have our discussion with Colby Mead from the Colby Cast, talking about the year in review that was 2022 for Star Wars and Lucasfilm overall. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that content. Just wanted to give a quick heads up that because this episode is not released on our typical Sunday release time, we will not be having our typical news segment, which is our Cloud City Gossip segment. So if you want to catch up with all the news that was released this past week in the Star Wars galaxy or Lucasfilm, Indiana Jones, Willow, etc., that will be taking place or will be discussed, I should say, rather, in our Sunday episode that will be coming out later this week. Also, if you're a fan of our Willow-based content, our next episode, I believe at the time of this release, will be Willow Episode 6. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out our previous episode, which was all about Willow Episode 5. So definitely all great stuff coming down the pipeline here and previously at Force Ghost Conversations. And I'm going to get cut to the chase here. On the other side of this break is our excellent conversation with our friend Colby Mead from the Colby Cast. Thank you for listening, and we'll be right back after this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing all that was in 2022 for Lucasfilm. So Star Wars, Willow, a little bit of Indiana Jones may possibly pop in here too. And to have this wonderful discussion, I could think of no one better to invite on the show than our guest today, which is Colby Mead, the host of the fantastic podcast, The Colby Cast. Colby, welcome to Force Ghost Conversations.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I really am looking forward to having this conversation with you, and I've been looking forward to my opportunity to join you too. So I really jumped at the chance at the invitation, and I thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure to have you on the show. Big fan of your work on the Colby Cast and what you're doing over there and the
Thank
positivity that you're
you.
spreading over there. So once we got connected at Celebration, I said, this is the person that we need to have on the show. This is embodying all the spirit of Force Ghost Conversations and what you do on a basis over on your podcast too. So,
I
uh,
appreciate that. I do try to we have some fun. I don't have the attention span to talk only Star Wars. There's so much out there. So I decided
absolutely.
I was just going to put it all out there, and who knows what comes at us from week to week. And most of the time, my two grown-up sons join me, and we have wonderful conversations, just like we do on the couch on any given night. And we decided let's put this out there and help bring smiles to some faces and talk about stuff that we love. And it usually ends up being about Star Wars, but we also talk about a lot of other stuff too. So
Yeah, it somehow always comes back to Star Wars, doesn't it?
always, always.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, speaking of Star Wars, let's talk about some Star Wars a bit. In this year of 2022 that was ripe with so much Star Wars content, and frankly, I don't think we'll be able to touch upon it all in this episode. But really, to start, I want to go back to the beginning. In case our audience isn't aware of your work or the Colby Cast, what was your introduction to Star Wars?
I love talking about it. I love talking about this because it's been with me my entire life. I don't even remember seeing the first Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back. As a matter of fact, it was only two when Star Wars came out. So of course I was about five when Empire came out, but I
Mm,
remember watching them at home. And I don't know if we had a VHS of it or if it was just something we recorded when it hit network TV, right? When it was
yeah.
doing its movie of the week type of thing. But I do remember vividly watching it at home, loving when Han turns around and tells Luke, "Don't get cocky, kid." You know, during the Millennium Falcon fight scene, I have vivid memories of being very scared of Yoda when I was little and
Mm,
watching Empire Strikes Back. But I really feel like where my passion became powerful was when I saw Return of the Jedi in theaters, and I have
ooh.
vivid memories of that. I was there, and I remember seeing that green lightsaber for the first time,
Yeah.
and just the thrill ride of that movie. And I remember going home and rummaging through my entire house looking for a black glove because I just wanted to put it on my hand like Luke Skywalker and run around with anything I could find to use as a lightsaber. So that was the original trilogy. You know, I sort of, you know, got interested in music and other things through the late 80s and 90s. But
Mhm.
then when the prequels came around, the love was just reignited. And this
Yeah.
time I actually was blessed to be able to experience it with my children because
Mm.
my wife was pregnant with our first son when the Phantom Menace came out. So obviously he was very young at that point. But
Yeah.
growing watching them grow up and just being able to enjoy the prequels on DVD or whatever the case may be if it was on TV with them, and then they fell in love with the Clone Wars. That just was like a renaissance, and it was just a family thing that we got to have fun with. And you know, the rest is history. Disney is owner of Lucasfilm now, and then just the whole explosion of new Star Wars, which I'm just loving every second of.
Oh, I love that. I mean, what a vivid memory of seeing that green lightsaber ignite in Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
With not only that, but I think the John Williams score just blasting at the same time. It's just, I think, I mean, I'm glad for you, but I know for a lot of people, that is just like a moment that is seared in their minds. Just like that moment of just realizing this is a Jedi right here.
Yeah,
This is when
yeah, that
this is
was
the Return of the Jedi.
it was amazing, and I'm so glad you brought up John Williams because he. I sort of make a joke that John Williams, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg were like my babysitters. They basically
Pretty
helped
much,
raise
yeah.
me, right? And those three men just have had a tremendous impact on me, and no more than John Williams. I will listen to John Williams. I even brought up John Williams on Christmas song podcasts because
Mm,
of his work on Home Alone, which is
exactly.
just
Yeah.
amazing. So yeah, absolutely, John Williams. It's not Star Wars without him. Well, I mean, it is. Well, let's be honest; they have some magnificent workers now, but early Star Wars, I just don't know what it would have been without that score behind it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think Lucas said himself, John Williams is the special sauce that
Yeah,
keeps the Star Wars together in the sandwich that is Star Wars. It's the
love it.
special Big Mac sauce on that.
Ooh, love
Um,
it.
and yeah, of course, John. I mean, his DNA is in the fabric of everything that is done. Without him, I mean, you can't not have Star Wars without a little bit of influence from the
Yep,
maestro
I
himself.
agree.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing that. It's a wonderful story, and I love hearing people's introductions. And I love that you're able to have some great memories with your own children as well as this has become a generational story for you as well.
Yep.
So heading into the year that is 2022, I have been saying that this year was going to be the year of Star Wars. Now, I want to ask your opinion on that phrase. Do you think that 2022 lived up to the hype and expectations as a Star Wars fan?
I think it's such a good question. I really, really love this question because it's not as simple as what it may seem to be.
Hmm.
One of my favorite Star Wars quotes is when Obi-Wan tells Luke on Dagobah in Return of the Jedi again that our truths are depend greatly on our point of view.
Yeah.
Right? I think that that is such. an important quote. I'm going into history. I'm working on a history degree, and I think that that is
Oh, perfect.
so important to history,
Yeah.
is the point of view, right?
Hmm.
So I looked at this question from a couple. I tried looking at it from a couple of point of views. So the point of view, from a point of view of a Star Wars fan, absolutely, it checked all the boxes for me. What other year besides 2022 have we gotten more hours of Star Wars content? Right?
Right.
Right? So,
Yeah.
you know, we with Book of Boba Fett, with Obi-Wan, and with Andor, there's been no other year in history that we've been treated to
Mm,
more Star Wars, even when the Clone Wars was a weekly show.
right.
You know, just the quality of that content was so pleasing to me, and I go into things with very minimal expectations, especially Star Wars, because it's just a joy to me. Star Wars in
Hmm.
general is just a joy to me. So I don't try to I just ride the roller coaster. I don't try to drive the roller coaster. I get on board,
Yeah.
and I'm there to enjoy it, and most of the time I do. So from that regard, 2022 was no disappointment whatsoever. It was everything I hoped it would be, especially with Celebration. Uh,
Yeah.
but when you shift the point of view to sort of um, like a genre fan in general, I'm not going to say that Star Wars in any way, shape, or form disappointed, but it's such a crowded space. If
Mm,
you start talking about Marvel and you start talking about House of the Dragon or Rings of Power, even
right.
Willow now it's running.
Yeah.
Stranger Things was a phenomenon early on, right, in May and
Hmm.
June. Then, you know, and we're not even really talking about movies. I mean, if you talk about the MCU itself, we had 3 series, we had two
Oh,
special presentations, we had 3 feature films. So when you compare it that way, I think it's just my long-winded answer of saying I want a Star Wars movie again. I want a
agreed.
Star Wars movie again. So in that regard, I think um, it may have been, it didn't get lost in the shuffle because it certainly made a lot of conversation. I mean, you and I
Hmm.
talked about it on a weekly basis, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how could it not? But I just think on the broader perspective, I would like to see Star Wars be more a part of the conversation, and I think a feature film needs to be a part of that conversation at some point. So hopefully, maybe next year.
Right.
But I
Right.
think that was the one thing that maybe left me wanting a little bit, and I was sort of keeping
Mm,
my fingers crossed when Celebration was coming around, and I thought we might
right.
get something, and we didn't. So, but that does not take away from the effort that they put forth and the hours and hours of enjoyment that we got with the 3 series that we did. So it's a wonderful question because it's not easy, it's complicated,
Oh,
and it made
totally.
me think. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I am going to agree with you 100% that the theatrical experience, that is something that is, it's in the DNA of Star Wars.
Yeah.
It is a part of the bread and butter of it. I mean, that's how it predominantly started here. That is something that is missing, and I was very fortunate at Celebration to have been a part of the. I won the lottery for the showcase panel on that
Oh,
Thursday,
nice.
so I was able to see the first 2 episodes of Obi-Wan on the big screen at Celebration, and boy, was that just a cinematic experience!
Yep.
And of course, Rogue One was re-released this past year in
Yep.
anticipation of Andor, and they showed 10 minutes or so of that series leading up to its release, which that show should have been on a big screen. I think that there's a market for Lucasfilm if they're looking forward to um, future content that they're putting out into the world, that there is a market for special event
Yes.
screenings of these, like
Yes.
whatever be the finale, right, or the season premiere, right. I think Mandalorian season 3 premiere could easily, first 2 episodes or so, put it on like a special screening series at your local
Hmm.
Regal Cinema or AMC, something like that. Like, I'm sure people will go out in droves to see that.
I'm all for it. Absolutely. And I'm encouraged by the fact that they started to put Andor out on different platforms, you know, around
Yes, that
Thanksgiving. I
was
think they
brilliant.
put it
Yeah.
out on, I think it deserves that kind of thing. And I'd love to see that stuff entering the conversation in other ways. So yeah, I mean, Mando season 3 seems like it's going to be epic in scale and in scope.
Hmm.
And what better place to watch something like, we've seen the trailer, right, where Mando's coming out of the clouds, coming down onto
Oh yeah.
Mandalore, and you just see, I want to see that on a big screen. So brilliant idea. I think if, hey, Lucasfilm, you're listening to Force Ghost Conversations, put out the first couple episodes in a theater. I'll bet you they're going to make some money.
Look, they would make some money, and then people would go back and rewatch it on
Hmm.
Disney Plus,
Hmm.
and the word of mouth would be incredible.
Yep.
I think so
Great
too.
idea.
And also, something that's been nice about the upcoming Indiana Jones movie is the marketing is so many months out in advance, as opposed to the
Yep.
streaming model where it's only a few weeks out. Right?
Yep.
It's like
Yep.
I see these Twitter accounts that are like, "Is the Andor trailer out yet? Is the Obi-Wan Kenobi trailer out yet?" And it's like, "No, no, no." And then finally, a month before it finally starts ramping up, and you're just over inundated with so much that you didn't have the time to like properly speculate or to digest it or to share it with your friends and family members in a way that you would for a movie with like 4 posters that come out and 3 different
Yeah.
trailers. It just
Yeah.
doesn't have the same lead up to it.
Part of my favorite thing about being a genre fan, whether it's Star Wars or MCU or whatever, is that lead up that you're talking about.
Hmm.
Well, I remember Rise of Skywalker in 2019 when that was coming out. After we saw the trailer there
Oh yeah.
at Celebration, I wasn't there, but I saw it on my phone as it was as close to it being live as possible. But that sort of kicked me off on a reading Star Wars frenzy. I went and I'm not really um I haven't traditionally read a lot of Star Wars, but at that time I just wanted to engross myself sort of in Star Wars leading up to
Yeah.
the Rise
Yeah.
of Skywalker. So I read Ahsoka and I read a bunch of different novels. I think Black Spire Outpost was one, and
Ooh,
then they
fun.
released what was the one, the book that is between Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker? Is it
Oh, Resistance
Resistance
Reborn.
Resistance Reborn? I made myself only read one chapter a day of that book
Ooh.
leading up to the Rise of Skywalker. And I
Nice.
wanted so many days I wanted to keep reading because it's such a fun book. But at the same time, I knew I was going to get a little taste of Star Wars leading up to Rise of Skywalker.
Mhm.
And I went through and I said, okay, how many chapters in the book? Okay, I have it. I'm ready to go. I'm just going to go one a day. I'm going to start on this day and I'm going to one a day walk. Read the last chapter the day of walking into the theater to see Rise of Skywalker. And that's the kind of stuff I love and enjoy, but it's in the anticipation of a movie or a big event, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not that that doesn't exist with the streaming shows, because I'm getting super pumped for Bad Batch. I'm
Got
looking
that
so
right.
forward to it. But there's really nothing like watching a Star Wars movie in the theater. There just
Mhm.
isn't. And as much as I love all the content we're getting, don't mistake what I'm trying to say. I just adore watching Star Wars movies in the theater. So
Agreed. Agreed. Hopefully, one day we get to see one very soon. Very soon. Whether it be Rogue Squadron, Taika's film, something else, Damon Lindelof, Star Wars. Who knows? Get me
yep,
back in a theater. Let's see what
yep,
happens.
it'll happen at
All
some
right.
point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about some of the stuff that came out this year. So, in terms of live action content, Star Wars only had series released on Disney Plus, and these, of course, include The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Andor. Now, which one did you enjoy the most? And that's not necessarily a ranking of any of them. Just in terms of
Sure.
like your fandom, which one did you maybe see yourself looking forward to most every week? I guess would be how I would phrase that.
All of them. No, that's just my cheater
That's the
answer.
right answer.
Yeah, it's all that stuff I just said about movies. I just realized, like, I would wake up at the crack of dawn and turn on Obi-Wan and turn on Andor and turn on Book of Boba Fett. But in seriousness, uh, I always joke that my favorite character is Luke Soka Kenobi, because I can
I
never
love it.
decide if it's Ahsoka or Luke or Kenobi. Ask me on a different day, and it's going to be one of those three, but it may not be the same 2 days in a row. So, that being said, Obi Wan Kenobi has always been a very important character for me personally.
Mm,
So, I was super excited about the Kenobi series, obviously,
Yeah.
and Ewan McGregor, having him back, and then the more we got to learn about Hayden Christensen and him being back, it
Oh
just
yeah.
got better and better and better. So the short answer is Obi-Wan Kenobi. I just adore it. That being said, Andor was a masterpiece.
Hmm.
I just think it
Hmm.
was a masterpiece. It was so different and so epic. It was epic. That could have been a movie. That could have been put on the big
Agreed.
screen. It could have been a trilogy of films right there. Just those 12 episodes.
Yeah. Agreed.
And um and Book of Boba Fett had its merits as well. I loved it. It was fun. It showed me things I wanted to see. But the winner of the crown for me in 2022 is definitely Obi-Wan. That
I
series.
love that answer. I mean, I make no mistake in apologizing for my love of the prequels on this
Yeah.
podcast. I am a child of the prequels. That's what I grew up with. It's really what got me connected with Star Wars. And the fact that I got to see my heroes back on screen again, and not only just my heroes, but the actors that portrayed those characters. And I've heard this on another podcast, but so I can't take full credit for this, but in a way, Obi-Wan Kenobi is as much of it's a great sequel to Revenge of the Sith. More
Yeah.
so than A New Hope is in some ways, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
clearly an episode 3.5, if
Mhm.
you will. It's what the springboard between those two trilogies that I never thought I needed, but now is so necessary to
Yeah.
understanding the saga.
Yeah. And it's such a personal story too. One of the things that I've always loved about Obi-Wan was his power of perseverance and always remaining himself through all the loss that he experienced.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
don't need to put the Obi-Wan loss checklist together because everybody knows who it is. But the fact that he was who he was in the original Star Wars always was a thrill to me, knowing the backstory and learning it through the prequels and then the Clone Wars. He still
Hmm.
remained true. But this episode, or this show, I should say, really showed us the opposite of that. He did start out in a dark place. He had questioned, he literally told this new Jedi that we got to know in the first episode, I believe it was, to run, to hide,
Yeah,
not to
go away,
fight.
right?
They lost. Yeah, we've lost. And to see him start there and end where he was just so satisfying and so much
Hmm.
fun for people like us who just I am also an unashamed and unapologetic apologist for the prequels. Love them, absolutely adore them, and Obi-Wan is a great bridge from 3 to 4. It's just a great bridge.
Agreed, 100%. Now, you could speak a little more about Obi-Wan Kenobi if you want entirely for sure, but was there a particular theme or idea from any of these series that really stood out for you as you were going through the year?
I mentioned the perseverance with Obi-Wan. You still see it there, even though he has his times of doubt and his times of being very low in his enthusiasm and his energy. But that doesn't mean he wasn't persevering, right? Too many times
Yeah.
I think we look at our heroes and they always have to be perfect. I love seeing Obi-Wan where he was because he's not perfect. I love seeing Luke Skywalker where he was in The Last Jedi
Yeah, agreed.
because it's easy to persevere when things are fine. You don't have to persevere when things are going well. You have to persevere when things are bad. And we got to see Obi-Wan do that. We got to see Luke do that. And I mean, that's sort of the one of the foundational messages of Star Wars is perseverance. And to see that put on Obi-Wan Kenobi's face and see him go through
Mm,
that through a 6 episode saga was really really impactful. Andor, one of the things that I really appreciated about that, and so many themes going in, it's
yeah,
hard to choose one,
spoiled for
but
choice for sure.
yeah, right. But the powerless, they actually do have power, and
Hmm.
that's one of the things I thought was so well done in Andor through Kino Loy, the Narkina 5 escape, through that epic and heart wrenching finale with Marva's speech, with the powerless rising up and fighting. the
Hmm.
most powerful thing in the galaxy, right? They have rocks, they have stones, they have fists and boots. These other guys have blasters and tanks, but they didn't let that stop. They had power because they chose to have it, and they went forward with it, right? And that whole tone of sleeping with in Marva's speech, and how we were asleep and waking up. Oh my gosh, that had lots of contemplation on my part. And then the Book of Boba Fett, I really loved the idea of the found family. He went
Mm,
around and he found allies. He started out with the Tusken Raiders, and then they had the tragedy with that, which I thought
yeah,
was such a compelling part of the story. I was
agreed.
so thrilled to see those flashbacks. Oh my gosh. But then, he's got Fennec Shand, and then he gets Black Chrysanthemum, and then, he's just so, and then obviously he gets Mando in the mix. And I just loved seeing him build that family around him,
Mm,
and the acknowledgement that this superimposing character that we've had for 40 years couldn't do things by himself and
yeah.
needed those people around him to accomplish his goal, and that they brought honor into it and not just meaningless bloodshed or um, bullying, and overpowering people. Even his little friends with the little Vespa scooters, they were important as well, right?
Yeah,
And I just loved that, because that's a Star Wars thing too. You find who is in your corner, and then you take on the empire with those people that are in your corner.
absolutely. I mean, you bullseye on the dartboard with all that stuff there. I mean, you are so correct. The found family nature of Book of Boba Fett, of course, is central to that key of understanding the show. And just the growth of the character. I think you alluded to that a bit here too. But he's no longer this lone wolf
Yeah.
going out and doing these bounty hunter gigs. No, he's being a leader. He assumed this role of power, and he's honestly doing it in a more honorable way than anybody has done before. I mean, honestly, Jabba was not doing things
No.
in a very a nice manner, and if putting it kindly.
Yeah.
But he's going out there. He's creating this family and believing in them, right? And putting them in positions by which to succeed in which they're tasked, and giving them the choice of freedom. Like, I'm not forcing you to stay with me here. If you want to
Yep.
be with the what we're doing here, then that's your choice, and I want you to be here because you choose to be here, right? He literally gives Chrysanthemum the choice, and
Yep.
those Gamorrean guards, right? He gives them an option to join them or not. Um,
Yep.
and he literally looks at himself in the mirror later on, which is a powerful scene when he looks at Cad Bane, right? And he has that climactic showdown with him at the end, where he's like, "This is what I could be if it wasn't for this growth that I've done, and I've
Yep.
changed. I know that I'm not the young character that I was anymore. I need to rely on learning different tools and techniques and using that to my advantage, which is how he wins in the end of the day." And so I really thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I know recency bias can come into effect here with the
Sure.
greatness that was Andor, and of course Obi-Wan had the compiling with Celebration too. So I know,
Yeah.
and it's frankly, it feels like it's been almost. I know it's only been a year, but it feels like Book of Boba Fett was like 3 years ago by this point with all the stuff that's come out.
When I was thinking about the Book of Boba Fett, I had to look back and say, "Wait a minute, was that in 2022?" And of course, yeah, it was an
Yeah,
early part of 2022. But yeah, you're right. How quickly a year goes by, but then when we're at the end of it, how long it seems like things have happened. Even though it was just a year ago, it seems like it's so much longer. Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
crazy how that works.
geez, even Obi-Wan feels so long ago. Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
gosh. I mean, Andor even too still feels a little distant when you had House of the Dragon and Rings of Power premiering literally at the same time. I mean, you were your podcast was certainly spoiled for content at that point. I mean, what do you
Oh
talk about each
man,
and every week?
it was an embarrassment of riches. There were some weeks where I was thinking, "How are we going to do this? How do we do this?" And then mix in movies too, because we will talk about movies as well. And
Yeah, and of
and
course
oh
She-Hulk
man,
too is premiering at the
She
same time. So gosh.
She-Hulk. Absolutely loved that show, and we did. We talked about it for about 6 or 7 weeks. I think it was. I was doing 2 episodes a week just to keep up with all the stuff I wanted to talk about. And I've since switched to one episode a week, which sort of feels like I'm forgetting something because it doesn't seem I'm
Yeah.
not recording something every day. But one day it was She-Hulk, the next day it was Andor, and the next day it was She-Hulk, and the next day it was like it was so much fun. Looking back on it, it was a blast. During it, it was a little bit hectic, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled that we have all these episodes to listen to now, and that's awesome.
Almost
So
80. You got almost 80 to listen to if you choose to, and there's all kinds of stuff in there. So be
that's
my
right.
guest.
Go back through the catalog. Go check it out.
Yep. Yeah.
So in addition to the series that were revealed on Disney Plus throughout the year, documentaries were also at the forefront of Lucasfilm's output, including Disney Gallery, The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, A Jedi's Return, and Light and Magic. Did you catch any of these on Disney Plus, Colby? And if so, what new facts or interesting concepts did you learn about these series or the making of Star Wars?
So I watched them all. I
Awesome.
watched them all because I love me some behind the scenes stuff. I
Amen to that.
absolutely eat that stuff up. So the the Book of Boba Fett stuff I enjoyed, just the behind the scenes stuff, and especially with the the treat that we got with the Rancor,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that stuff. And anytime I get to see the volume, to be quite honest, I love, because I just love the volume. I know some people are.
Yeah.
It's funny how conversations switch, because when we first had Mando season one and the volume became sort of common knowledge, everyone was just marveling at the technology and, oh, Lucasfilm has
Hmm.
done it again. But now in the last year or so, we've sort of seen this back, like not a backlash, but sort of like people coming up against it saying, oh, you need to go practical. You need to. I'm fine with
Right.
either. I don't
Right.
care what you do. I think the volume is a triumph. I think it's
Absolutely.
amazing.
We
And
wouldn't
if
have
you
three shows without it.
This is so true, absolutely true, and I'm convinced that Andor used it a little bit. I was seeing a couple scenes where I'm like, I wonder, I
Hmm.
think that
I think
might
they
be the
did. Yeah.
volume. Yeah, but that's fine. I don't care if they did or didn't. I just think it's magnificent, just the technology behind it. And one of my favorite things about Star Wars and Lucasfilm is that they always push that envelope, that they're always
Hmm.
introducing new technologies. So that was sort of the takeaway with Book of Boba Fett. But for the Obi-Wan series, I just adored, and I mean it, I adored seeing Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen watching the prequel scenes and talking about their memories from that time. I loved watching and learning more about how this whole series unfolded, because I'm sure, like me, I'm sure you do the same, Anthony, where we're up on the news, right? We want
Hmm.
to. I'm not
Oh yeah.
looking for spoilers. I don't really love going into that stuff. I try to avoid spoilers. But at the same time, I do like to be informed and know what's coming up. I mean, that sort of makes for good podcasting, right? You sort of need
Absolutely. Yeah.
to. So we all knew that Obi-Wan Kenobi, the series, was going to be happening, and there was years and years of, Ewan McGregor playing coy during interviews and whatnot. But then to actually get to hear them tell the story of Kathleen Kennedy meeting with Ewan McGregor, and then
Hmm.
Deborah Chow meeting with Hayden Christensen up in his home, having some tea. I just thought that was so charming. And, we just sort of had the curtain peeled back a little bit. We got to hear a little bit more about the personal side of things. And that was the other thing about the Obi-Wan documentary, was how personal they made it. It
Oh
was
yeah.
so much about their experience, which doesn't always get to be told by them, right? Many times it's through, reports of this person and that person, but they were actually sharing it with us, and I really
Hmm.
enjoyed that.
Hmm.
But I think the top of the mountain for me, as far as documentaries go, was Light and Magic.
Oh yeah.
I I look at it as so much more than just a behind the scenes documentary. That thing is inspirational. I came across, or I came away from each episode inspired, not just
Yeah.
to get up and go out and accomplish thing, but to be creative, to look for inventive ways, to think outside the box, because that literally is the story of Lucasfilm,
Hmm.
or Industrial Light and Magic, I should say. Um, so, and some of the things that I really enjoyed was seeing the continuation from one breakthrough to the next breakthrough, like when they were talking about the movie The Abyss and the
Yeah.
whole water, the water. I remember watching that as a teenager and just being like, "What am I looking at? That's water in like this alien form," and it made a face. But then that turned into T2, right? Terminator 2
Hmm.
with the I'm forgetting his name, Robert, the
Robert
Terminator
Patrick,
in that.
yeah.
Yeah, Robert Patrick, thank you. In that film, and just I loved hearing the story of how that water thing turned into the next Terminator film.
Hmm.
And then they told the story about the Jurassic Park team and how
Oh
they
yeah.
were secretly, right, in their own time, in their own little back
In
closet
this
area.
dungeon thing, yeah.
Yeah, just working on this animated, computer generated dinosaur that was never going to be the plan. It was not the way that the studio was going, but they believed in their skills. They believed in their ability to create something that was going to work. And imagine if it didn't, their reputations, what would
Ooh.
have happened? Bye bye. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
But then for them to have so much, they told the story of how all the executives were going through. I think Kathleen Kennedy was there and Spielberg, and they decided that they were going to throw up that one test that they had up
Hmm.
on the screen so that people could see them. That's bold, Anthony. That is inspiring. I love it. They're taking their jobs, their careers, and putting it at risk. And they gambled on themselves and they won. And it gets me so pumped. Love it.
Agreed. I think my initial reaction to seeing that whole scene where they put up the test footage up on the screen just casually in the background, right? I
Yeah,
was like, I think I said to my wife, like, "Oh wow, the chutzpah it would take to to do something like that." Like,
no doubt.
I don't think I would have the gall to do something like that in my own job. That I'm pretty much a safe person at my job. I wouldn't try to push the boundaries like that. But I'm like, wow, they really changed history with just that moment. I think
They sure
what did
did.
Kathleen Kennedy just like pat? What is this? And then he
Yeah.
explained what it is, and then just like gave him a pat on the back and said, you're going places in your career."
And then when they sort of took that to the next step where they had their first screening, I think it was just the T-Rex scene where they had or maybe
Yeah.
even just the T-Rex that was sort of like the bones, right, in that one small room where they saw it, but then they put it in a theater on a
Hmm.
screen and they had all the money decision makers in there and they were all flabbergasted, right? They just sat there with their this can happen. Like they changed the way stories are told and it's so much more than TV and movies. It's so much more than pop culture. We look at stories and we learn from them. They affect us as humans and they change the way that those stories were told. Man,
Yeah.
it's just and we got it seemed like we got those little nuggets throughout the whole series of that Light and Magic. In every episode, there was just one little thing or two little things where you're like, oh, they changed everything. It was great. Loved it. I loved it.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, no disrespect to the other documentaries that came out this year, but Light and Magic was just the cherry on top of this wonderful cake that was this documentary series. I
Loved it. Yeah,
did
absolutely.
not expect it whatsoever. Like there was almost radio silence about this series aside from that panel at Celebration that they leaked no footage out of it. I don't even
Yep.
know think they showed a little bit of footage if anything.
Yeah.
Only until like a week before the show comes out, they drop a trailer for it, and it's a great 6 episodes coming out. And uh, as a person, and you alluded to this too, like we're in the weeds about the behind the scenes stuff
Yeah.
for these series and movies that are in the DNA of our existence. This, I mean,
Yep.
we wouldn't be the people that we are today if it weren't for these movies impacting us at the right time. And a
Yep.
lot of that is the effects and how they were able to put that together that it puts the smile on your face. Like you think of that Luke Skywalker moment in Return of the Jedi, right? With the lightsaber, like
Mhm.
ILM. They
Yep.
wouldn't be able to put all that without the models and the creature making that put that scene together.
Yep.
Um, so you just add all that together and you're like, wow, okay, they did this, they did this, they did this, they did this, and all the way up to the volume. Golly gee. And I think Light and Magic is just a masterclass in how to tell a documentary story
Yeah.
where you're never bored at any part
Mm.
of
Yep.
that 6 part series, and every episode aside from the last one ends on an epic cliffhanger that
It
you're like,
does.
I need to watch the next one right
Yeah.
now. How do you not Like, I think the first one ends with George Lucas just being like, I was not happy. Like, how
Yep.
do you not go to the next episode after that? Or
Credits.
basically, I think the episode 5 where it's like, and Jurassic Park was just around the corner, and we're gonna change the game up with everything. Like,
Yep.
how do you not go to the next one after that? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
brilliant, eloquently done. Ron Howard and Kasdan and team that put it together, just chef's kiss. I don't think it can get much better than that.
So good. So good. I agree with 100% of what you just said.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, Colby, I would be remiss if I did not bring up Star Wars Celebration, where you and I had the pleasure of meeting.
Yep.
I want to hear about your experience at the convention, because that too took place in 2022. Amidst all this wonderful stuff that we also were able to discuss in this episode thus far. But we also, as a fandom, got to meet up together again amidst, with the COVID and all that going on in the
Yep.
world. And we haven't been able to really had a chance to interact with each other for the last couple of years. We were able to get back into one convention center again safely. And I want to hear about how you experienced Celebration. What panel or activity at the convention was most memorable to you overall?
Well, first in general, before I get into the specifics of the question, I I appreciate the fact that you brought up how it was, at the end of this time where we were all forced to basically be separate, be apart,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes its toll on everybody in its different
Yeah,
ways.
agreed.
And as much as we're sitting here and on opposite sides of the country, and we're having a
Yeah,
conversation,
literally.
and I'm so thankful for that kind of thing. I've met so many wonderful people through podcasting, through Twitter, through Instagram. And, just last night I had a wonderful opportunity to have a Zoom meeting with some friends from Star Wars, and we did a secret Wampa. It was a secret
Oh,
Santa
I
where
love
we
it.
all sent each other gifts a couple weeks ago, and then we all got together last night. We sat here in front of computers and opened them and enjoyed each other's company. And that's a thrill, and that's wonderful. But sort of like the the thing I said about Star Wars movies, and there's nothing like a Star Wars movie, being in the room or being in the same area with somebody that you're friends with, that's irreplaceable, right? There's
Mm.
nothing like that. And that's what Celebration was for me. All these people that I had spent the last few years meeting, quote unquote, right? Meeting online or through Twitter, Instagram, so on. They were standing in front of me, and I kept on looking at them and going, I'm used to seeing like a square around your face,
Yeah.
on a screen, but here you are in living
In the
color, right?
flesh.
So
Yeah.
in the flesh. And for me, and this was my first celebration, I had never attended a celebration before. And all the planets aligned, and it all worked out. And it was just such a thrilling experience, 4-day experience, and really 5-day, because I got the chance to hang out with some friends the night before.
Mm. Awesome.
Tom Gross and Danzy from Coffee with Kenobi. I got to
Oh,
Ross
excellent friends of the
Holoban,
show.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and Ross and his girlfriend, and Corey Club from CWK as well. I was able to spend a little time with them before Celebration even started, and then just meeting everybody else that had come to town. And it's sort of in my backyard. It's about an hour away from where I am, but I still consider it sort of my backyard. So I just felt great that it's like all these friends were coming to my neighborhood.
That's awesome.
So it was just such a wonderful experience. And for me, definitely the highlight of Celebration, it was that aspect of it. Just
Mm.
meeting you and your wife as I was walking in. And I'm like, I told
Yeah.
Caleb, my oldest son, I told Caleb, I said, I think that's Anthony from Force Ghost Conversations. But there were like 1,000 people around us. And I sort of got myself into a position where I could see your shirt, and well
Yes.
done with the shirt, because it said Force Ghost Conversations. Like,
Thank you.
yes, that's Anthony. So I went and I got the chance to quickly chat with you guys, and then like that was it, right? We were still all at the same place, the
Mhm.
Force Ghost. I mean, the convention center, but you could go 4 days and not meet anybody somebody that you hope
It's
to
true.
meet,
Yeah.
because there's just so many people. So the connections and hanging out with people, meeting people for the first time, was absolutely the highlight for me. Another great activity was the Disneyland After Dark, the Star Wars night.
Oh, brilliant! You got to do that.
Oh
Awesome.
yeah, yeah. My both my boys and a friend of mine, we got to go, and again we got to hang out with, Dan and Tom and Corey, and Clayton Sandell, who is a wonderful newsman. And I mean, we were, with the exception of my sons, these middle-aged men running around Disneyland like we were 12 years old again. And you know what? That's great. That's okay.
I
I
love it.
I just enjoyed every second of it. And I've never been to like a themed Disneyland night like that for Star
Hmm.
Wars. So just seeing that aspect of it, it was all Star Warsed out. It was the first time I got to ride Rise of the Resistance, which was just, is,
Wow.
if you have the opportunity to do it because it is
Agree. Yeah.
amazing,
Life
absolutely
changing.
incredible. Um, as far as panels and that stuff goes, I made a really, really bad rookie mistake on whatever day they had the Mando panel. That was the only lottery I won, was the Mando panel. And I think it was on the second day of celebration, if memory serves right.
I think the third day.
Okay, so
I
that
think it was
makes
that
even more sense.
Saturday. Yeah.
Because the first day, my boys and I, we arrived there 7 a.m., right? And we
Hmm.
expected long lines to get the wristbands and get parking and whatnot. And it went so smoothly. It sort of lulled me into a false sense of security. So then the second day, we got there a little bit later. And then the third day, we got there a lot later. And I thought, because I had won this lottery, we didn't have to
You were
wait
just
in
gonna
any
get
line.
in.
I could
Yeah.
just walk in. Nope. Rookie mistake. I learned my lesson. So we actually missed out on the Mando panel, which
Oh no.
ended up being amazing, right? Like this,
Yeah.
that's what so many people were talking about. But that's okay. We were still there. We were still having fun. That actually was the night after Disneyland, and we were literally
Understandable. Yeah.
we were walking down the street at 1 o'clock in the morning, recording an episode while we were walking to our car, which was a mile away, and we published it. I published it on the freeway as my son was driving home. I'm publishing it on the freeway, our day two recap. But we didn't get home and in bed until probably 2 in the morning. So we were just a little bit like, let's get up a little bit later, but we missed the Mando panel. But that's okay. That's just a side story. The panel we did get into and I really enjoyed was the Bad Batch panel.
You got into that.
And
That's
we
awesome.
did. We got there, and that's sort of a funny story too, because I'm sorry, we did win one other. I don't think there was a lottery for the Siege of Mandalore. Do you remember if there was a lottery for
There
that
wasn't.
one?
No. No. That was just a
Okay,
cue.
so that was on my wish list though. That was one I definitely wanted to be in and see the Siege of Mandalore,
Hmm.
in a cinematic type of experience, like you
Hey,
said.
again, that exactly that communal setting for that 4 episode arc.
So
Release
having
it,
learned,
Lucasfilm.
yes, absolutely. So having learned what we learned the day before with the Mando faux pas, we were there early. We were ready to get in line, and we decided, let's just go watch the Bad Batch panel because it
Yeah.
seems like we'll be able to get into it. And then when we were in line, people started talking about how they were not going to clear the auditorium after that panel
No,
for the
no, they
Siege of
don't. Yeah.
Mandalore. So we were like, nope, we're going to sit right here. We are not taking a chance. We're not. So we sat in that auditorium, and we got to hang out for a long time with Craig Dickinson
Yeah.
from Reading Between the Reels, and it was so much fun. We just sat there and chatted and talked and had a great old time, and then we sat there and watched the Siege of Mandalore, and it was sort of perfect because that was the last day of celebration, and I
Hmm.
personally was exhausted. Just-
Yeah.
so sitting in a nice, cool, dark theater and watching that Bad Batch panel and then the Siege of Mandalore was just sort of perfect, and it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah. A nice, relaxing way to end a very busy couple of days. Like as much fun as Celebration is, you're on your feet a lot. You're queuing a lot. You're walking around a lot. You may not have the meal schedule that everyone else you typically
Yeah,
do. So you may be a little famished. I hope everyone's keeping hydrated during these events, but time flies by. So I mean, it can take its toll on you after a couple of days, especially if you're
it
staying
sure
out late
can.
at Disneyland one night.
It sure did, but boy, oh boy, would I do it again in a heartbeat. Absolutely.
Whew, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you were able to go to Celebration, and man, honestly, I'm telling you now, my wife and I talk about meeting you at Celebration, maybe weekly. We
Oh
bring it
wow.
up because that's the first time I've ever been like spotted by anybody. So just like we're famous. We made it.
Yes,
we
that's right. You got spotted on the street.
someone tracked us down and said, "I like what you do." I was like,
It's a fun feeling.
that's an amazing feeling, exactly. So yeah, thank you for sharing your experience on that. For my last question here, I wanted to close out with a look ahead towards 2023. What Star Wars or even Lucasfilm project are you most excited about? And I include Lucasfilm project because Indiana Jones and the Dial of
Yep.
Destiny is coming out in
Yep.
June. We still got some Willow going into the new year here too.
Yep.
So, what are you most excited about?
It's interesting when you bring up Indy and you put him in the mix because it just goes back to that movie comment that I made. I don't remember if I don't think I saw Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in theaters when it came out. The boys were a little bit young for you never know what you get with Indy, right?
Yeah,
With Temple of Doom,
true.
right? He's sort of like Temple of Doom. Is it going to be Temple of Doom or is it going to be Last Crusade? Is it going to be snakes or what is it going to be? So we didn't take them to see that when they were young. So I haven't seen an Indiana Jones movie since The Last Crusade, and that was the 80s, right? So if we're looking at Lucasfilm as a whole, I would put Indy at the top of my list because Harrison Ford,
The
Indiana
Last Ride,
Jones,
yeah.
John Williams
John
in
Williams'
a
Last Ride too.
theater.
Yep.
And yeah, when can I buy tickets? I think that's what I tweeted when the trailer came out. It was like, when do I get the tickets? So I'm really excited about that. On the Star Wars front, though, it's hard for me to, having said what I said about my favorite character, and Ahsoka is up there in the top three, in the three-headed character that I call my favorite. Um, I'm super excited for Mando, but it's like a 1 and a 1A situation for me with Ahsoka. The thing that sort of tempers my excitement with Ahsoka is that we just don't know when it's coming out. They've given us
True.
2023, but they haven't given us an indication of when. And if you read the tea leaves and, oh, they were filming during Celebration, and it usually takes about a year or so, blah, 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 we're
Hmm.
probably looking the second half of 2023, maybe, but it's just a guess. I
Yeah.
think if we get a view of that, a first look and a release date, then that's probably going to kick my excitement into next gear. So for right now, I'll put Mando season 3, um, just because we don't have to wait that long for it. We know it's coming,
Yep.
and I just think the Mandalorian has such potential to continue to become a really incredible Star Wars story, which can be
Hmm.
very epic. Now we're getting into the weeds with actual Mandalore, boots on the ground. We have seeds of stories that have been planted over the past 2 seasons that are going to start sprouting, and I'm excited about that. Really excited to see where we go in that story because I just love the reference that John Favreau made a few years ago, before Mando season 2 came out, where he sort of compared it to Game of Thrones, where they wanted
Mm.
to introduce a lot of characters that had their own independent storylines, and then sort of work towards this big epic type of
Right.
story.
Yeah.
And now we see that happening with the Ahsoka series and whatever else they're doing. But that's exciting to me. But I can't leave out the Bad Batch. I have such a soft spot in my heart for Star Wars animation. Love Omega, love Wrecker. He's my guy. He just makes me laugh all the time,
Yeah.
and I just love the dynamic of that group. So, I would be remiss, as you said, I would be remiss not to mention the Batch, and that's just a matter of a couple weeks away now. So,
Absolutely.
very excited for that. Very excited for the Bad Batch.
100%. And that's just the known of what's coming out in
Yeah,
2023. We don't know if Skeleton Crew could
yeah,
potentially come out at the end of the year. The Acolyte, who knows if that has a small chance of coming out this year still.
yeah.
There's a lot and who knows what's in the pipeline that's not even announced yet at this point.
Mhm. A
And
movie.
a movie, please?
We do have another celebration coming up in the
Yes,
spring,
yes.
so
They got to fill up those panels. They got
they
they
do.
got to tell us some stuff that's coming out.
And
Um
as much as I've said about wanting to see a movie announcement, I want to also add to that that I'm very at peace with the fact that they're taking their time.
Yes.
Listen, I love all of Star Wars. When I watch Star Wars, whether it's a streaming show or a movie or animation or whatever, I'm that 8-year-old kid again watching Luke and his
Hmm.
green lightsaber. And that's what I will always love it for what it means to me as me. Will there be better and worse? Absolutely. I'm a fan of the sequel trilogy. I love the sequel trilogy. Um, I have wonderful memories of the experience of watching those movies. Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. It
Hmm.
has taken the number one spot from Return of the Jedi from my childhood. I am thrilled with Rey Skywalker. I love the
Yeah.
fact that she became Skywalker. I love it all. I do think that those three movies just suffered from a plan. They did not have a plan put together. Were they good? Yes. Did I enjoy them? Yes. Could they have been better? Sure. And the fact that they're taking their time and not announcing something, I'm okay with that because that just means that because Anthony, you know that they're sitting there working on a daily basis to make sure they get this right. And I have faith in them, and I'm excited to see what we get.
Yeah, contrary to belief, they just don't sit up there at the Lucasfilm headquarters, or if they work remotely, twiddling their thumbs on it and get paid to do nothing. Like
Yeah.
they're working hard at each and every day to put together literally all the stuff that we just talked about in this episode, all the stuff that's coming out next year, and then thinking 4 or 5 years down the line, what do they
Yep.
have in this upcoming plan that they have for them?
Yep.
Um, so you're absolutely right. There's so much going on. I think I am personally, if I know they get a lot of flack for releasing or announcing, I should say, upcoming Star Wars films that may or may not happen.
Hmm.
Right? I
Sure.
know there's some fall dead in the water. It's just the development game of the film industry in a
Yep.
nutshell.
It's
But
not
I
new.
would rather they announce a litany of films that never come to pass rather than releasing all those films if they're not to a standard of quality that we
Yep.
come to expect as Star Wars fans.
I
I would
agree.
rather the the adage of quality over quantity, of course. And although we've gotten a lot of quantity the last
Yep.
year, and in the future, I don't think that quantity is ever going to stop. The quality has never subsided. Even
Yep.
animation, documentaries, live action series, hopefully movies when they come back to prominence again.
Yep.
They
Yep.
have a standard that they have to uphold and a legacy too that is set by George Lucas.
To use this analogy, and we'll go with the comic book genre, I would much rather have Star Wars giving us what we get through the MCU than what we get from DC,
Hmm.
because every day there's some new mess of news with DC, and I understand they're in a transition time with new ownership and whatnot. But even going backwards over the last 5 to 10 years, I'm really not excited for anything that's going to come through the pipeline through that studio until they prove to me that they know what they're doing. I think they're on the right track now, but they certainly have. I didn't go see Black Adam. Now I could walk in my living room and I
You
could
can
turn
watch
on
it now if you
HBO
want.
Max,
Yeah,
and guess what? I don't have a plan to do that just because I don't. I'm not going to invest my time in something I know is not going to go anywhere for that type of genre. If it's a standalone movie, whatever, it's a different story. But so yeah,
yeah,
Lucasfilm, take your time, get it together all the way because I got faith in you. You're gonna knock it out of the park, and I'm gonna be happy when you do.
agreed. And I think we can both agree Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is going to be that grand slam
Oh,
in 2023.
absolutely.
That trailer
Yeah.
alone was enough to get the goosebumps on my body again as soon as that John Williams scored a triumphant adventure theme. The Raiders March came back through
Oh,
my speaker system. I said, we're back in it, baby.
I don't care how many times I watch that trailer, and I've watched it many, many times. The last scene in it where they all pull out their guns and
Hmm.
start shooting, and he just drops down. I just think it's so funny. I just
That's so
laugh.
Harrison Ford.
So I
Yeah.
love it. It's such a they flip the whole guy with the sword, doing
Hmm.
his fancy sword work, and him just pulling the gun out and shooting him. They flip it right on its head, and I think that's just so funny. And if the film is any indication, or if that is any indication of what we're getting in this movie, I already love it. I can't wait.
Agreed. Yeah. Come on, Indy. Don't never bring a whip to a gunfight. Like, you know this.
It sure
um,
does.
well, Colby, thank you so much for coming on to Force Ghost Conversations and talking through the year that was 2022 for Star Wars and Lucasfilm overall, and with a look forward to the future. At this time, feel free to plug the Colby Cast or anything else that you'd like to share. The airtime is yours for the moment.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Anthony, for asking me on. I had a blast. It was so much fun talking with you and answering these questions. Obviously, I have a passion for talking about this franchise. I just love it, and I love that you're doing what you're doing with the Force Ghost conversations and being a positive voice out there too. So thank you so much for having me on. You can find the Colby Cast on Twitter and Instagram at the Colby Cast, spelled out just like that. My name is spelled Colby. So you can find us on both those platforms. And if you want to say hello to me on a personal level, my Twitter account for my personal Twitter account is at crosschecked3, the number 3, and that's a hockey reference. Like you get
Heyo,
cross-checked
yep.
hockey. So that's also on Instagram at crosschecked3, Twitter and Instagram. So drop a note, say hello, and I love meeting new people. And I can't thank you enough, Anthony, for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll be sure to have you on again in the future. This was an absolute blast, and thank you again for coming on the show. And to those of you at home, thank you for listening. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. And we'll be back in your podcast feeds before you know it with a brand new episode. And until then, may the force be with you. Take care.